Hey there, welcome to episode 96 of the Social Business Engine podcast, the podcast where I invite thought leaders from all industries to share their expertise on social and digital communications best practices. I'm Bernie Borges from Find and Convert, and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On today's episode, you are going to meet Rick Wion. Rick is an accomplished marketing professional recognized by AdWeek as a top 50 top innovator in digital marketing. Rick is currently the Senior Director of Consumer Engagement at the Kellogg Company. On this episode, Rick will reveal Kellogg's strategy behind their web property, openforbreakfast.com. We'll discuss how Rick is leading the movement at Kellogg for transparent communication across the spectrum of nutrition, sustainability, and philanthropy. Now, this episode is in cooperation with Visually, a leader in visual content development, just as their name clearly says. We've published Social Business Journal Volume 7 with Visually, and it's titled Winning Through Niche Content Marketing. This journal features 5 brands who are winning by being very niched in their approach to reaching and engaging their customer through their content. This journal is linked from our show notes page for this episode, as well as at our journals page, and you can find both at socialbusinessengine.com. And now, here's my interview with Rick Wion, Senior Director of Consumer Engagement at the Kellogg Company. Rick, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, why don't we begin our conversation for those who perhaps may not be completely familiar with everything that you guys are doing at the Kellogg Company? Let's start there. Paint a picture for us, if you would, of the Kellogg Company.
Sure. Well, I think for anyone who grew up watching cartoons on Saturday morning, you probably were eating a bowl of Kellogg's cereal at the time. I know I certainly was. Growing up, I was a huge fan of Frosted Flakes, and in fact, that's still kind of my go-to cereal that I have most mornings. But the Kellogg Company is it's a global organization. It's one of the leading food companies out there, and it's the number one cereal company in the United States. But it's beyond cereal these days as well. Kellogg's makes cereals that everybody knows, also makes snacks and chips and cookies and other really yummy foods, as well as frozen foods. The company's been around since 1906. The Kellogg's Corn Flakes brand itself has been around since that time. But then we're also launching new foods and cereals literally every week and every month here at the company.
Interesting. Okay, terrific. Well, that's a great explanation, and you are absolutely right. I think most of us, myself included, can certainly relate to eating Frosted Flakes. As a matter of fact, I noticed that when I fire up those waffles, those are Kellogg waffles.
Yes, the Eggo.
The Eggo, exactly. All right, terrific. So, what is Open for Breakfast? Why don't you explain what it is? And of course, Rick, if you could start with the why. Why did you launch Open for Breakfast, and what is it?
Sure. Well, Open for Breakfast is the platform that we use to communicate with our customers around issues of transparency that we know are important to them. So through this platform, we're able to tell stories about what Kellogg's is doing in the areas of nutrition, how we're improving nutrition, sustainability, and a lot of our great commitments there, and then also our giving back and our community efforts as well. But Open for Breakfast really, the germination, the insight behind it is simply the fact that people want to know what's in their food. Whether it's cereal or crackers or cookies or something that you get when you're on the go at a restaurant, at a convenience store, people want to know, right? What are the ingredients in this food? Where do these ingredients come from? How is this food processed? Are you following fair labor standards? What are you doing to give back to the earth? More and more these days, consumers are going beyond just the price and value equation of their decision-making habits. It goes. They're going beyond and saying, well, what exactly goes into this product? How does it help my body? How is my purchase benefiting society and even the planet at large? Mm-hmm. And Open for Breakfast is the way that we're able to tell those stories to those consumers that are most interested.
Okay. And how long has it been around? When did you launch it?
So it's actually just hit the 1-year anniversary yesterday. So it launched January of 2015.
Okay. So January 2015, and we are in late January 2016. So, yep, 1 year. And so how's it going?
It's going really well. It's been a great journey. We've learned a lot along the way. In this first year, we knew that part of it was going to be learning the ropes, both in terms of how we're publishing, but also how we're engaging with people as well. Because a really big and important component of this whole program is not just us telling our stories. There is a question and answer element where we're actively soliciting consumers, where we're saying, here's our stories, but let us know your questions. What other questions do you have? In fact, on most of the boxes of Kellogg cereal right now, there's a call out on the box that says, what can we do to make your mornings better? Ask us a question at openforbreakfast.com right mm-hmm. now. Mm-hmm. And so there's literally millions of boxes out there where we're saying, hey, consumers, ask us a question. Let us know what's on your mind. And so in that time, and that can be a scary proposition for a lot of companies. It's, everyone says that you want to be transparent, you want to engage with consumers, but then when you open yourselves up and say, okay, now ask us the question.
Right.
You don't know where that's going to go. You don't know what kind of questions you're going to get. And so, and when we launched, we had built up a process and infrastructure to be able to answer the questions. But there still was that moment of, okay, let's turn it on and let's see what we got. And in that first year, we got thousands of questions, and we answered all of them, and it was a really great start to a program like this.
So do you want to give a little background, Rick, on how this was approved internally? Was this a marketing initiative? Was it a PR communications initiative? What was the process internally to get the buy-in, the funding, that whole background?
Sure. So this is a program that the kind of program I think that a lot of folks who are in marketing communications are seeing more often these days in terms of it's a hybrid. It's partially marketing. It's definitely communications. The digital engagement portion of it is really the engine that makes it all happen. And so going back to that germination I talked about previously, mm-hmm. the people want to know what's in their food. This is our platform for explaining that. But to make that happen, we need support from marketing to be able to develop the program. We need support from communications in terms of the skill set to help find and tell the stories that we want to tell. Also, consumer affairs, our customer service team has been very involved in the beginning. They're the ones who are frontline taking first crack at all those thousands of questions that came in during the first year.
Oh, so you created more work for them.
Admittedly, it is more work, but also, you look at it with a different lens of it's more dialogue with consumers,
right?
But not many people are going to say that they want to have less dialogue with their consumers.
Okay.
But at the same time, part of our journey in that first year is as the volume of questions grew over time, we look for ways with our consumer affairs team to figure out how can we make this more efficient? How can we be better at answering more questions in a shorter amount of time and with less burden to the folks who are actually answering those questions?
Okay, and what was the level of C-suite involvement? I mean, did you have somebody at the C level that had to buy into this, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so needed to get C-suite involvement. Our CEO, in fact, John Bryant, he was very supportive of this, not just in terms of intention, but also providing a little bit of seed money to get the concept off the ground. But that was essential, but it also was, I think, in a lot of ways, very obvious because, again, as a food company, consumers want to know what's in your food.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we can't underscore enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then developing a program that directly gets at the heart of a very important matter for our company, became something that we had a lot of heads nodding very early that yes, this was the right thing to do across the C-suite, marketing and communications and these other departments that I mentioned before. It was just a matter of saying, okay, we all agree this is the right thing to do. Now, how do we develop a model that is supporting marketing, is driven with storytelling through communications, and then has the consumer interaction of the consumer affairs team that we know is going to be an element to make this successful.
Okay. So I would imagine, Rick, that to do the storytelling as well as to respond to customer questions, that you need skills of people throughout the organization that are outside of marketing and communications. Am I right?
Yes. And so if you go to the website, one thing that you'll see is that we try to do a lot of features with employees within the company, sharing their stories of things that they are doing. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite examples of this is there's an article where we've interviewed 3 food developers. And the role of a food developer within Kellogg's is they kind of straddle that point between the test kitchens and then the actual plants and facilities where the cereals are made. And so in this one story, we're talking about our Origins line of cereal. And I'm interviewing the developers and, say, well, explain your job. And his job is to take the recipe from a test kitchen and then figure out how you scale it up from something that you can make a few times in a kitchen to something that you can make thousands of times in a day at plant. And it's a very unique job, but it's also something that, while it's process and there's a certain amount of engineering type expertise that goes into it, it's also it's a food-based thing. And so those people are as much foodies as they are engineers. Mm-hmm. And so then, their expertise, their story is something that really brings to life that Kellogg's is a food company. We sell food, and we have people who are passionate about food, figuring out how to make it great. And so the role of the marketing communications team is to help discover what those stories are and package them up. But it's really the people outside the department, the experts in those different areas, that really are the ones, they're doing the work. They've got the stories. We just need to help find and then polish them up.
Okay. Package them up and polish them up. And okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, this is the Social Business Engine podcast. So from a business standpoint, Rick, is openforbreakfast.com something that is expected to be a positive contribution to the business with any kind of revenue measurement, or is it more something that is just perceived as, it's just the right thing to do. It's just the modern way of communicating and engaging with the customer without the ability to measure the impact on the business. So to restate my question, maybe, can you measure, or are you measuring the impact of the business, or just looking at it as this is just something we have to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was born out of the notion that it's something that we need to do. This is the trend of consumers demanding transparency from big companies and wanting to know what's in their food. That's a trend line that we've seen increasing over the couple of years, and it doesn't seem to be turning anytime soon. So from that standpoint, it is something that it is becoming a necessity. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm looking at very actively is how can we tie this to sales. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't have a direct line right now. I think it's something that a lot of people working digital. If you're working in a digital space that allows you to measure e-commerce type of conversion, then yes, you can tie social to sales. But most of our sales are through retail outlets, through grocery stores. So I don't have that dotted line. Mm-hmm. As a proxy to that, though, I am measuring things like consumer sentiment and purchase intent, and using that as our as kind of our bridge to hopefully eventually being able to measure the real sales impact.
Okay, so that's just part of the journey then. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, and what are some lessons learned? You mentioned that you're a year old now. It's been a journey. What are some lessons learned that our listener here that hasn't yet perhaps launched something similar to this? Of course, people are listening from all kinds of different industries, right? Not necessarily the food industry, where the demand may not be quite the same as it is for you at the Kellogg Company, but similar demands from their customer. What are some lessons learned?
Yeah. Well, one lesson that we learned along the way that I think is very interesting is the role and how we interact with consumers or activists that may not necessarily be our customers.
Okay.
And I bring that up first because in launching a program like this, I know anyone who's looking at a transparency program, anyone who's looking at something where they're going to be actively engaging the public at large, there's always going to be that natural trepidation of, not every company is loved by everybody in the world. Even the ones that are the top performing on whatever stock market, there's going to be people who don't like them for whatever reason.
Right.
Well, part of our journey was understanding that and then figuring out, well, how do we react to that? Again, not everyone's going to like us. That doesn't mean that we need to necessarily worry about that, but what we do need to be able to do is, as an organization, be ready to respond to that. And then also reserve the right to choose not to respond to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If somebody comes and is just looking to argue and not looking for dialogue, is being specifically mean, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. We reserve the right to say, hey, you know what? You're just yelling. You're
right.
not asking a question. So if there's
right.
no question to respond to, we're not going to respond.
Sure.
Another interesting nuance to that is that we have seen from time to time activist groups who have come to our website to ask us questions with an activist agenda. And we wouldn't necessarily choose activists to be a driver of traffic to our website, but what that does do is it allows us to share our side of the story on particular issues. Mm-hmm. And so, someone comes and asks a question, we respond with an answer that is our true and honest position on an issue. Now, if someone saw something on a website from an activist and then they came and asked us a question, then by providing an answer, we have at least balanced out the conversation. Maybe we changed their mind, maybe we didn't, but at least we got to share our side of the story versus them just hearing one side from the activist group and thinking that is just the way that a certain situation exists in the world. One of the benefits that we found in Open for Breakfast is that it's a platform for us to go into a different level of depth on stories and then also give love to stories that otherwise don't get a whole lot of attention.
Okay.
For example, one of the questions that we've gotten a few times on Open for Breakfast is about palm oil. And because there's been some news in the media about palm oil harvesting having a negative effect on rainforest areas. Well, Kellogg's has a sustainable palm oil commitment that's verified through two different bodies. So the net takeaway is that the palm oil that's used by Kellogg's is sustainably sourced and does not negatively impact rainforest areas. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of story that not a whole lot of people are aware or are that concerned about it. But for those that do, boom, we've got the story, we've got the content, we've got an infographic, we've got a way to tell that not only is it something that we are also concerned about, but we've already taken the steps to address it in a positive way.
Okay. Now, are you learning more about your customer segments? So, for example, the mom with young children versus the senior, both of whom are eating Kellogg cereal products and other products. Mm-hmm. Are you learning more about those segments?
Yeah. That's actually a very important takeaway and benefit of this program is that by looking at the questions, by listening to the questions, you learn a lot from the consumers. So as I mentioned, we've received thousands of questions last year, and so through those we get to see the nuance between what people are concerned about when it comes to nutrition versus what people are concerned about when it comes to sustainability, and some of the good work that we're doing when it comes to environmental issues like reducing greenhouse gases. Okay. We've also seen, too, what's interesting is consumers have volunteered information that's been really interesting as well. Like within a couple of weeks of each other at one point last year, I had two different questions from consumers. One starting off with, hi, I'm 7 years old, and I saw this on the cereal box this morning, and I think you ought to put more puzzles on boxes because I like doing word games in the morning. Okay, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. And then a week later, get another question from somebody who says, I'm 80 years old. I've been eating Kellogg's Corn Flakes for 50 years. Here's my question about the corn and Corn Flakes. And so it's interesting because we're seeing now a lot of these are going to be anecdotal things, but even in those anecdotes, you see interesting little snapshots into consumers and what they're not only what they're eating, but what they're thinking about when they're eating our cereal.
Interesting. Okay. And so I mentioned earlier the business part of Social Business Engine. So let's touch on the social part, and maybe you can comment on what's the role of social media in openforbreakfast.com.
Yeah. So social is very important because it allows us to take the stories that we have on Open for Breakfast and extend the reach and extend the impact of them. Social is another opportunity that we have for getting questions from consumers and either directing them to our website to get an answer to those questions, or we can take content from the Open for Breakfast website and put it out in social as the answer to someone's question out on Facebook or Twitter.
So you distribute content as answers. Okay.
Yeah. And that's an important thing, too, because it also requires us to think a little bit differently. As I mentioned, on Open for Breakfast, we have stories about sustainability and about nutrition and then giving back to communities. And a lot of those stories, I like to think in total that they tell a really great overall story about the company. But then again, individual stories, whether it is a 30-second video or an infographic or an article with an expert in a blog, those need to stand alone in social as well. Because sometimes that one piece of content that we put out there will be the only interaction that we have with somebody, which is okay, but we need to make sure that piece really delivers and works hard for us as well.
Right. Okay. And is the content being distributed and shared through social by your team in marketing/communications, or is it also being shared by Kellogg employees?
So it's mostly published through our brand channels, so the Kellogg's master brand channels and then some of our individual brand channels. Having employees publish this, it happens once in a while. It's not a coordinated effort at this point yet, but it's something that we think that we're looking at for sure. So
is that part of the future of the program as it evolves?
It's definitely on the radar. I need to see how some plans play out, but I would love to make that happen.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, Rick, so what I'd like to do now is I would like to summarize the key points from this conversation. I have been taking some notes, and the way this works is I'm going to summarize, and then I'm going to ask you to respond to my summary by simply elaborating or correcting or clarifying on any specific points that I made that maybe triggers a thought in your head that you want to elaborate on. Okay?
Okay.
So we began our conversation with a little introduction overview of the Kellogg's Company, reminding us that anybody that's been around for a while grew up probably on Frosted Flakes, the cereal, and that Kellogg is the number one cereal company in the U.S., even though you are global, and you make many other foods. You'll use the word yummy foods, snacks, chips, and so forth, and again, been around since 1906, so that's quite a while. We are really here talking about openforbreakfast.com, a digital communication platform that is really focused on addressing the issue of transparency with consumers. And you're focused on three topical areas: nutrition, sustainability, and giving back to the community. And the whole purpose behind it, the why, if you will, is that people really, really want to know what's in their food, and they want to know how it was created, and they want to know how you're impacting the planet and being, a contributor to the planet, both in the way of products as well as just your philanthropy. So you're about 1 year into the journey now, as we are here in January 2016. You launched it in January 2015. And what you said, Rick, is that in that 1 year journey, you've been learning how to engage with people. You've learned that there are some activists, in addition to consumers, that there are activists that sometimes engage with you, and they may or may not be a customer. Sometimes they have an activist agenda, and you've kind of been figuring out how to respond to those people, and also just listening to questions that consumers ask. And you mentioned that helps you learn a lot about the consumer, that there's a very strong Q&A element to openforbreakfast.com, and really the whole ask us a question approach. You're putting that on boxes and perhaps other places that I missed, and that you've been building up a process and an infrastructure to be able to handle those questions coming in from consumers. We talked about the business rationale behind launching openforbreakfast.com, and how this really comes back to the why, how consumers are demanding transparency for really anybody that's in the food industry, other industries as well, but especially in the food industry. And that right now you're focused on trying to measure sentiment and also purchase intention, and you hope to be able to tie that back to sales as the journey continues for you. And the effort is part marketing, part communications. You needed support from the marketing people to develop the program, and then, of course, support from the communications team for skills and resources, as well as consumer affairs and customer service. I kind of joke with you, maybe didn't really joke with you, that you've created more work for them because, there's questions coming in that they now have to answer. But it's an opportunity to create dialogue with consumers, and that's something that you very much want as a consumer brand. You even mentioned that you had CEO support right out of the gate. I think you said with some seed money just to get it off the ground. I didn't ask you if he dipped into his pocket for that or if that just was a budget line item, but you can comment on that. And that there was a lot of internal support, that this is just the right thing to do, but you had to develop a model for the storytelling and how to develop the stories and how to package and distribute those stories. You gave the example, Rick, of three employees who were food developers, who are kind of part engineer because they're developers, but they're also foodies. You got them to tell a story, or you got a story out of them. We didn't discuss really how that happened, but the story was how they can take a recipe that they've developed and how that recipe can be implemented at scale. And then the last topic that we talked about was the role of social, and how social really extends the reach of the stories, and how it is something that is being done through your branded social channels. And that maybe as the journey continues to evolve, that you might get some employees involved, but it's primarily being communicated and distributed through branded social channels. And it's a way for you to directly distribute stories to consumers, again, through social. It's also a way to distribute content that answers questions that have been asked, and how many of these stories really exist and are distributed as standalone pieces of content. So, Rick, how did I do in my summary? Is there anything that you'd like to either correct or elaborate on?
No, I think you covered it well. This program is something that we're 1 year in. This is going to take a while. We're learning along the way. We're experimenting with different types of content, different stories, different ways to engage with consumers. So it's something that it takes a big commitment, and we're just going to continue to learn from it. Okay, terrific. All right, Rick, is my final question, my one thing question. What is the one thing that you like to leave my listeners with that is an actionable takeaway from our conversation today? Okay. Well, Bernie, I think the one thing that I would say that hopefully people can take action on is when it comes to transparency communications, looking at the trends to know that it's important is something that a lot of industries, a lot of professionals see right now. The action on it is finding out the way to make it real within your company. Now, I had the benefit of everyone knows that people want to know what's in their food, but in a different organization, it might be looking for that one story that you can hold up as the example of transparency brought to life. There's a lot of different ways to crack that nut, either making it very obvious or finding the shiny object. Those are just two ways to kind of crack that code.
Okay, transparency brought to life. Find it ways to make it real within your company.
Yes.
Terrific. Outstanding. Well, Rick, where would you like to send people online to learn more about openforbreakfast.com, hint, hint, as well as connect with you online?
Sure. Well, definitely check out openforbreakfast.com. Watch some of the videos, see the stories, submit a question. People can also reach me directly. Twitter is a pretty good way to reach me. My Twitter handle is rdublife. That's RDUB as in boy, LIFE. Also, they can reach me through rickwion@gmail.com or rick.wion@kellogg.com.
Okay, we'll have all those linked up in the show notes as always, and my listeners know that. Well, Rick, thank you so much for sharing your story here today on openforbreakfast.com. Really enjoyed it and has been very enlightening.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Well, before we sign off, I do want to remind you that this episode was done in cooperation with Visually, a leader in visual content development, just as their name so clearly says. And we've published Social Business Journal Volume 7 with Visually, and it is titled Winning Through Niche Content Marketing. This journal features 5 brands who are winning by being very niched in their approach to reaching and engaging their customer through their content. This journal is linked up on our show notes page for this episode, as well as on our journals page, and both are at socialbusinessengine.com. I also want to remind you that if you are subscribed by email to get our weekly updates, which we send every Friday, then go ahead and be on the lookout for this one, or maybe it's already hit your inbox, depending on when you're listening to this. If you're not subscribed to our weekly updates and you'd like to be, just visit our subscribe page at our website. And hey, if you're a regular listener to the Social Business Engine podcast, thank you. If you're a first-time listener, thank you as well. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll push the subscribe button on your podcast player so that you get each of our weekly episodes delivered to your player. If you're an iTunes subscriber, I would be very grateful if you'd write a review and share your sentiments about the podcast. What do you like about it, or how can we improve it? That helps me, and it helps other people discover the podcast. So you can just do that by going to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes. And lastly, I invite you to engage with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is my name, @BernieBorges. Our podcast handle for Social Business Engine is @SBEngine. We also have a Facebook page, Social Business Engine. Well, actually, facebook.com/socialbusinessengine. And our most popular hashtag is SBE Show. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. I want to thank my guest once again, Rick Wion, Senior Director, Consumer Engagement at the Kellogg Company. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.